Check out this exclusive interview by Cinema Siren with Anthony and Joe Russo, the directors of Captain America, The Winter Soldier. They are encyclopedic about movies.
Yeah, we got 3 days out of it. And everywhere you go, there's massive restrictions. You know, when we shot the monuments, some of them we had maybe a 15-minute to a half-hour window to get the work that we needed.
I know the city very well. I've been coming here. I used to work for a congressman way back, and even though I was based in the district, I would come here. And then my sister-in-law lives here, so I love D.C. I know it really well, so it was great to be able to dial into it.
Cool. When you were kids, you bought comic books because you're both really big comic fans.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first comic book, and it was Captain America one of your favorites, or was he just one in a great collection that you were big fans of? Do you remember buying comic books and which ones you were?
He has a more specific history with it than I do.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm trying to remember. I mean, my uncle, when I first started collecting, my uncle gave me a box of comics, of old comics. And I can't remember what I pulled out first, but one of the first books I ever read from that batch was a Captain America Falcon team-up, which is weird that we're sitting here 30 years later having a conversation about a Captain America Falcon movie. But, so there's real emotional context for me. Captain America, I liked him. I had issues with him as a character. I thought he was a little bit too much of a Boy Scout and a little jingoistic. But also this movie goes a long way in trying to strip away the
jingoistic aspects of it,
component of it, which
Absolutely.
is why we put so much politics in the film that were antithetical to his 40s black and white nature.
I mean, the comic interpretation that was most exciting to us was the Ed Brubaker run in 2005. So it was not long after our childhood. So that's sort of when, that sort of reinvention or deconstruction of the character and that sort of a postmodern sensibility. That was like the most exciting version of the character. It was more textured, complicated, and that's sort of what excites us. That's our favorite version of the character, and that's where we tried to go with the film.
It's a movie that I think appeals to left-wing, right-wing, and centered people for different reasons. One of the main reasons, I think, is because of the post-traumatic stress disorder issue that you brought into it. And it also is the linchpin for his connection to his new friend, to Falcon. So can you talk about that?
Sure.
Here's the thing. All the great superheroes have a really poignant experience of tragedy in their backstories. It's Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, etc. So the fact that Captain America is starting off this movie in this place of where we've all lost people in our lives, but he's lost everybody. Everybody he knows is gone. It's a really profound experience and a very isolating experience, and it's a great place to start. A character, a vulnerable character, especially one that's as sort of focused in his morality and his values as Cap is. So, they're like Greek mythology. It's like, having that sort of great tragic flaw is like makes them human to us. And I think that's ultimately why, if we are able to go across party lines in the way that you're talking about, it's just we tried to make the character very human, very relatable. And the problem that he's facing, the climate today, is not really a partisan issue. I mean, we're trading freedom for security in our modern world to keep ourselves safe and try to find a humane way to keep ourselves safe. But we have a Democratic president who meets with his advisors on Tuesday mornings and goes through a kill list and decides who's going to die and who they're going to drone strike. And sometimes we execute those drone strikes and we happen to kill their family while we're at it. So it's like that's the climate we're in, and that's not a party issue. That's a national security issue that anybody, no matter what your political affiliation, is going to have trouble figuring out where the right and wrong sides of the line are.
You bring him into this time period. It's all modern. It's not World War II, it's now. But there's an aesthetic visually and in terms of the color palette and the production design that's kind of an interesting, it incorporates 70s espionage color. That palette is in there. And the parkour, which is more physical, it's a more visceral, physical interaction between characters. Can you talk a little bit about kind of bringing together the aspects of what makes it now, but also the espionage thriller aspect of it?
Well, the design was a very conscious choice to strip away color and to give it an institutional quality. That whole choice leads up to the return of him to his outfit in the third act, because that's really the only real color in the movie. So that was in a weird way, it's almost like an Antonioni kind of exercise where you are spending 90 minutes in a very gray world, and until he has clarity,
finds himself in a way.
Yeah, then we can reintroduce color into the movie. So that was the thinking on the design front.
As far as moving them into the present day, part of the fun in a Rip Van Winkle story is the difference between where this guy started and where he goes. So it's like Cap started in that sort of like World War II era. That film was very much like an homage to the golden age sort of origin of Captain America, and it had that sort of tonal quality. And it's like and it was appropriate for that time period because you had a very black and white conflict, between the Allies and the Nazis. There wasn't much gray area there. So it's like, how do you take a character that started there and pull him as far away from that as you possibly can, and so that he's most isolated and most lost? I mean, that was also part of the appeal of sort of crashing him into this hardcore modern world,
I mean, I saw a lot of influences from a lot of movies. I saw Ronin and Days of the Condor and Banlieue 13 with the parkour. Can you name a few other movies that were particularly kind of
Heat
at
was
your
a big
fingertips?
influence,
Right?
The bank heist in Heat, and that certainly influenced that sequence where Winter Soldier attacks her car on the freeway and then the whole fight spills out into the streets. The subjectivity of the camera work in that, and the sort of immediacy of it. The Raid as a modern influence. He and I saw that movie together 6 months before we went to work on this film, and we just love the clarity of the action. It's moving really quickly, but it's clever and you can follow it.
Edits are clear.
Yeah, and it seems like there's been there was a movement towards implied action the last 10 years. And we thought, let's go back to, I remember McTiernan. I really like movies that, that embrace the action and that I can track what's going on. Plus, it's what makes Cap super is that you can actually follow what he's doing and you go, oh my God, that guy's moving so quickly. So it's exciting to see the actor executing the fighting in the movie. So Chris trained really hard for it.
Less CGI too.
Less CGI was really important to us because he's a human character, and also I get pulled out with CGI. We wanted to do a film where it had a real throwback quality in terms of its visceralness. John Woo was a big influence. De Palma, huge influence on Nick Fury's car chase and the elevator scene. Those are both classic. De Palma. You put a character in an impossible situation. How's he going to get out of it? So those were really, he and I remember we were sitting there watching the stairway scene in The Untouchables, just thinking like, how can we find a way to put this kind of tension into the movie? What else?
I saw the Frankenheimer conversation.
Yep,
I saw some of those Popeye Doyle, which is this French Connection.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we love that. We love the emotional desperation that Popeye Doyle has in that car chase. That sort of goes beyond just catching the thief. It's sort of like he's looking for like a whole vindication of his character, in that sort of chase.
That's why it's such a classic chase. It's not really about the chase. I mean, yes, it's clever, right? You're chasing a subway car, but what it's about is that this character is, he's trying to prove himself right, Popeye Doyle, and so desperately that he'll almost run over a woman with a baby carriage. That's what the chase is really about. So that's why we look for, what we borrowed from that was how do you illuminate character through action. One other big influence was Marathon Man's the opening of the movie's Marathon Man. It's Cap running around the mall. But really, the biggest creative debt probably from a structural standpoint goes to 3 Days of the Condor.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, because I know you guys are huge fans of Robert Redford, which is an amazing coup to have him in the movie, but there's a moment where he reaches up and puts his arm up and is looking out the window, and I was like, I've seen that before. I loved that reference. I saw a number of, because I've seen every movie that he's been in. Can you talk a little bit about when you worked with him as an actor? What were you pulling out, because you're such big fans of his, what did you learn just from even being on set with him?
Well, I mean, first of all, he's a supremely gracious, intelligent, disciplined, focused man, like a real Renaissance man. And so just having him on set was an amazing inspiration. Just his professionalism and focus was just supreme. And here's the thing: it was very. I mean, look, he's a very easy actor to direct because he's so smart and he's a director. And we often find in our experience that actors who actually also direct are even easier. You know, they understand exactly what they need to do. So it was really our whole process with him was we had a couple meetings, you know, when we were sort of talking with him about doing the role, where we talked about character and ways to richen the character. He had a few line ideas for us. He loves the political dimension of the storytelling as well. So I would say most of our work happened before set with him, and he's the kind of guy, once he shows up on set, it's all dialed in. You know, it's just shooting it.
What's fascinating about him is being a living legend. Right, he could behave any way he wants to, but he's truly probably one of the nicest and as Anne said, most disciplined people we've worked with. He would set his chair up about 4 or 5 feet away from our chairs, read his New York Times, and so you could see sort of the old school training that he had, the way that you approach work on a set. You know, today actors, the minute you call cut boom, they're gone and they're off to their trailers, and then it takes 2 hours to get them back to set. He would go sit in his chair, read the New York Times in between takes, or in between setups, and when we were ready, we'd say, Bob, we're ready. He'd say, great. Put down his New York Times, put it down in his chair, go in and act, come back out, read his New York Times until we're ready to do the next scene. It's a really fascinating contrast between old school and new school.
I mean, one of the things we did talk to him about, I mean, one of the things that excited us about casting him in the role is the sort of Henry Fonda effect, we called it, because we love how Henry Fonda was used in Once Upon a Time in the West as a villain for the first time.
A foil to his usual characters.
Exactly, and this is a bit of a spoiler, so you know, in the interviews it's hard to talk about, but the
he's a complicated character.
He's a complicated character. Very good, thank you. So yeah, sort of using Redford in a similar way was really exciting because he has just such a wholesome sort of Captain America-esque vibe to himself in many ways. So that was fun.
But he also remains complicated. Not to give spoilers away, but you definitely. One of the best things about the movie is nobody is completely one thing. And to be able to do that in a Captain America movie is pretty amazing. To be able to get away with no one being. I mean, you know, I say Captain America's super power is his integrity, his honesty. That's more than anything. Is really his number one trait. Chris Evans wants to be a director. Did you feel like working with him? Was he learning from you, or were you feeling like he was kind of, soaking in all of what you guys were doing, or how was working with him?
Absolutely. He's he's a really hard-working actor, and he was very much, he's really helpful as a collaborator, especially with these complicated action scenes, about sort of figuring out how to execute them well. So it was, he was very active in understanding how he sold certain things to the camera, how he could sell them better. He was always looking for that.
Self-corrector, which is really interesting. Reminded us a lot of Jason Bateman. Jason Bateman was a great self-corrector,
Also a director now, too.
Yeah. Yeah, Bateman, I remember one time we were shooting a scene in Arrested, and it was going really well. It was very funny, and it was over Arnett's shoulder, and Arnett leaned in the camera and blocked Bateman right in the middle of Bateman's line. And while Bateman was still delivering his line, he just leaned over and cleared himself to camera, which is like, to be that aware of what you're doing while you're acting is extremely difficult. And Chris has a very similar...
It's a superpower, actually.
Yes, yeah.
And I think, having worked with as many actors already, because you guys have been doing it for so long, you can tell when someone's going to be a director by the way that they act as actors, I feel like.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see him as a director. In terms of working together as brothers, although I think it's really cool there's such brotherhood themes involved in Captain America, this particular movie, what is in the difference in your aesthetics personally that informs working together and makes you stronger? What is different about the two of you that makes working together better?
I don't know. I mean, look, we really enjoy working with each other. It's a very easy process, and it's like we like sort of like heating up our ideas together, and before sort of exposing them to the rest of the world. And
we have a lot of similar sensibilities, and I think we both love actors, so we keep a running list in our head. But we're really attracted to really well trained actors. That's that at the end of the day is
I mean, it's hard to find an example of an actor that we don't kind of agree on. I mean, I know it exists. It happens from time to time, but not in a major way. But that's part of the process of movie making, because it's like you're always having producers or studios weigh in on certain choices, and then you're constantly collaborating with people in movies. That's why there's hundreds of names after a movie when the credits roll. Mm-hmm. So it's just it's an inherent part of directing.
I know you're attached to Captain America 3. Do you have more other things you already know you're going to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, look at that. That's a long process, Cap 3. That'll be a 2-year process. But we've written a bunch of scripts, very personal scripts.
Oh, good.
That, we got sidebar into segued into television for a long time, had a great run, didn't want to leave it. Now we're going to do 2 of these films. So after that, I think it's going to be time to do the personal movies.
And Power. Power's always good when you want to do your personal work.
That was Soderbergh and Clooney taught us that very early on.
Yep.
One for you, one for them. That was their big motto.
Siren.